Tim, welcome to Watch One, and thanks for logging on. Why buy a moon watch when you can buy a chronograph that goes far, far beyond? Today, we're looking at the Rolex Cosmograph Daytona 18-karat white gold, 40 millimeters, reference 116519, with Meteorite dial. Flung from the far reaches of space, you can buy this watch on our website, watchyouwant.com. And if you like these videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Watch You Want Inc. Now you can see on my wrist 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference. It has the classic modern Daytona look to it. So athletic, almost gazelle-like. It seems to share the minimalist mechanical aesthetic with the race cars that have inspired the Daytona for generations. So unlike the bulkier Supercase, GMT Master, and Submariner references from recent years, this contemporary 6-digit serial or 6-digit reference number Daytona has a much lower profile and definitely more elegance and I would even say dress versatility than the Rolex rotating bezel sports watches. And you can see it sits nice and low on the wrist. So while you can definitely strap this one on over your Nomex race suit, you might also want to slip it under a dress cuff because of its low profile and its elegance. And that's assisted by the combination of a delicate case, delicate in detail, not delicate in construction, and an elegant leather strap. Now the Daytona, along with the Day-Date, is one of two Rolex Oyster case watches that traditionally have been equally acceptable and equally appropriate on leather straps or metal bracelets. And for my money, it's all about the strap. Honestly, the look of leather, in contrast to the beautiful polished white gold, the flow from the integrated white gold end piece into the leather strap down to the Rolex white gold deployant clasp with clamshell security, that makes a unique look that's uncommonly seen in the pantheon of Rolex greats and Rolex classics. So to have a Rolex that stands apart in a world where, let's face it, there are plenty of them, that's a unique benefit of owning a Daytona on a leather strap. As if there weren't enough benefits to owning a Daytona already, it's a different look, compounded by the fact that this watch combines white gold, very discreet, a nod and a wink between you and your watch, with an extraordinary iron meteorite dial with red accents. Now this is a rarity and an occasional issue item from Rolex. The Namibian asteroid, or I should say meteorite, from which this metal was taken is no longer publicly accessible and no longer can it be exported due to government restrictions. So what Rolex has in its stock of these asteroid fragments are essentially all they've got. So occasionally issued, sliver thin, chemically stabilized to preserve the crystalline structure of the iron. It's a beautiful and unusual piece to encounter, more so when you see it on a leather strap with white gold and these red accents. Everything about this watch is individualist. It's an exception to the rule that Rolex watches all look the same. This one doesn't. So if you want the name that's universal with the look that's highly individual, this would be an excellent Rolex for you to choose. Now, I want to emphasize that all the elements that are applied to the meteorite, you can see the texture of those applied elements when they sort of catch the light at this angle. They're all polished white gold. The Roman numerals, the tri-indices at 9, 6, and 3, the polished white gold hands and the chapter rings of the sub-registers, all gold as per present Rolex practice. Likewise, the tachometer scale bezel. And you can see the iron has a distinctly different gleam to it, more of a chaotic crystalline matte silver against the high polish, brilliant reflections of the gold elements. It makes for a fantastic sort of subtle contrast within a watch that is all about subtlety. Now inside, it's just as extraordinary. Rolex's caliber 4130 automatic chronograph movement, a COSC certified Swiss chronometer. Rolex spent the better part of half a decade planning this movement because it didn't want to go with an in-house chronograph movement until it knew for a fact that it could one-up the legendary El Primero that it bought from Zenith. Now while it did detune the Zenith movement from 36 to 28,800 vibrations per hour, COSC certify it, add a free-sprung balance, and make certain improvements to the winding system that increased its robustness, it was nevertheless an Bausch movement. Rolex, with the 4130, sought to one-up the Zenith in every respect, starting with power reserve. 52 hours for the El Primero, 72 hours for the 4130. Likewise, the Zenith used a horizontal clutch, so when you started the chronograph was running its train wheels, meshing its train wheels, and ultimately producing wear on its own internal components. That doesn't occur with a vertical clutch here, because the vertical clutch has essentially no moving parts between the parts that mesh. They close, they clamp, and there's no play between them. So you can run the chronograph continuously if you prefer to have a center seconds hand. A lot of people feel that for aesthetic purposes and ease of use, that's the way to go. The zenith movement is chronograph as needed and only when needed. The Rolex, for the sake of center seconds usage, is chronograph all the time with no penalty except a small hit to power reserve. Now if you stop the chronograph and wind it fully, this is the kind of watch that you can take off on a Friday afternoon, throw on your Submariner for a wet and wild weekend at the beach or the pool, pick up on Monday and it's still set and ticking correctly. Likewise, with the vertical clutch, the extra power reserve, Rolex also threw in improved serviceability. Fewer different types of screws, fewer parts in an absolute sense, and easier access to components for service. This watch represented a real top-to-bottom rethinking of how a chronograph should be designed in the modern age, which is why since 2000, the 4130 Daytona movement has been considered something of the standard of reference for those looking to design a modern chronograph movement for a contemporary sports watch. And since this watch right here is an M series watch with an M serial number, it doesn't just have the Rolex Parachrom anti-magnetic hairspring, but the very latest anti-magnetic Parachrom Bleu handmade Breguet overcoil hairspring for the ultimate combination of resistance to positional variation, that is, timing disparity in different positions on your dresser, as well as thermal variation resistance and anti-magnetism. So you're getting the total package here, an uncommon combination of strap, metal, and dial with the latest Rolex movement in a contemporary 6-digit reference number Rolex Cosmograph Daytona, the iconic watch from the world's most recognizable and celebrated watch manufacturer, and yet you're getting a piece that you're likely never likely to see in duplicate. So being able to have a Rolex and yet have the only Rolex of its type really is the best of both worlds. Now, I'm not one to be driven by image, prestige, but I got to admit there is something psychically satisfying about having the only hot rod in town, and this really is. This is a Cosmograph Daytona with the works, and I've got to mention, from a purely subjective standpoint, every time I pick up one of these white gold Daytonas on a strap, I'm taken aback by how heavy it is, and that's because Rolex, on its sports models, steadfastly refuses to feature a sapphire caseback. And the logic behind that extra mass, that unexpected mass, is that that solid caseback of gold weighs a lot more than a cheap sapphire view piece. So what you wind up getting is more gold, more value, and ultimately just a weightier piece on the wrist. And that pretty much sums up Rolex. They're all about engineered substance. This watch has it in spades, but it also has a look unlike any other. So maybe it's actually the best of 3 worlds, not 2. You can see it, and if you like, you can drive home this Rolex Cosmograph Daytona on our website, watchyouwant.com.